Good evening, Alex. Well, I heard your discussion earlier about all of the racism, personal racism, directed at Kamala Harris as a candidate. And it's fascinating to listen to all these pundit discussions that appear that over the course of the last couple of days about, oh, they should have done this and they should have done that, and they've got to learn to appeal to these voters. I haven't heard anyone say how you're supposed to appeal to the racist who will never vote for a woman. How is that supposed to happen? I'm waiting for that instruction.
Well, when you find it, let me know.
Yeah. Well, we're going to consider it later in this hour, too. I think it's the issue that needs much more attention than it's getting.
Have a great show, Lawrence.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you. Well, exactly 52 years ago today, Republican President Richard Nixon won his reelection in a landslide, a real landslide, over Democratic Senator George McGovern, who was running on what turned out to be the losing campaign Democratic platform of ending the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon won 49 states, with only Massachusetts voting no on Nixon and no on the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon, who lost his 1960 presidential campaign by less than 1% to John F. Kennedy, and won his first term in 1968 by less than 1%, was reelected 52 years ago with 61% of the vote, a margin that would be impossible to achieve in today's electorate. The Vietnam War ended up lasting longer than Richard Nixon's second term. 18 months after Richard Nixon's second inauguration, he resigned from the presidency while impeachment proceedings were underway against him in the House of Representatives. Now, we know opponents of Donald Trump's second term will not be as lucky as the opponents of Richard Nixon's second term. We already know there is no possibility of impeaching and removing Donald Trump from office, no matter what he does. The United States Supreme Court has said it's okay for Donald Trump to commit any crimes he might want to commit as president of the United States. And Republican senators have made it clear there is absolutely nothing Donald Trump could ever do that would compel them to vote guilty in a Senate impeachment trial. But what if Donald Trump, in effect, resigns the presidency, but keeps the title? What if Donald Trump just hands over the job to someone else or to a few people and does nothing? Maybe plays golf when he has the strength, which might not be so often as he turns 80 in his second year in office. And so the question we consider tonight is, President who? Who's going to really be the president? And what is that president going to actually do? Donald Trump did his first interview today since the election, and he actually revealed nothing. He revealed intentions to do nothing. NBC's Kristen Welker got Donald Trump on the phone and asked a very simple question. What's your first action? Do you do tariffs first? Do you do your deportation plan? What's first? Question could not be simpler. What's first? And at no point in the words that Donald Trump offered was there even a hint of an answer. He never even said the word tariffs or the word deportation. In his answer to that very simple question of what's first, he said, well, I think we have a lot of firsts because we can do things at one time. You know, we obviously have to make the border strong and powerful. And we have to, at the same time, we want all our people to come in the country. And, you know, I'm not somebody that says, no, you can't come in. We want people to come in. We're going to have a lot of businesses coming into our country. They want to come into our country. We're the pot of gold. We're still the pot of gold. And Donald Trump rambled on, talking about not wanting people to come in the country who are murderers and drug lords. And that was it. Of course, no one wants murderers or drug lords to come into the country. And so the actual answer to what's your first action was, I think we have a lot of firsts. That was it. That was the whole thing. That is not a president who is eager to get to work. That is not a president who's getting the Sharpie ready to sign a 60% tariff on the sale of goods made in China to the United States. My personal bet is Donald Trump is not going to do the crazy tariffs that he talked about in his campaign, which the Wall Street Journal and every other economist in America accurately reported would skyrocket inflation. Donald Trump will be talked out of that by people who actually understand tariffs. And then Donald Trump will publicly claim that he doesn't have to institute wildly dangerous tariffs, all of which would be paid by American consumers, and he'll say he doesn't need to do it because the mere threat of his tariffs has managed to get China to suddenly become a fair trading partner with the United States. So just the threat of tariffs worked. That will be the Trump tariff policy. That's my bet. In other words, he will lie his way out of his breathtakingly stupid campaign ideas about tariffs. And I suspect something similar will happen with the Trump mass deportation campaign promises. He promised to deport at least 11 million people. Nothing like that has ever been done in human history. There is no place on earth that has ever picked up and moved 11 million people to another place on earth. The cost of trying to deport 11 million people in this country would be at least $315 billion, according to one estimate. The entire budget of the Justice Department is $50 billion. Donald Trump plans to do giant tax cuts for his billionaire friends and for corporations. So the money for deportation would have to come from somewhere else in the federal budget. There's only $50 billion in the entire Justice Department budget. So you'd have to find $315 billion to deport 11 million people. It's never going to happen. The number of law enforcement personnel in the United States of America would have to at least triple, with all the new ones being hired exclusively by the federal government to exclusively work on deportation roundups. If you ever get to watch our best police departments like the NYPD make an arrest when they are doing it the right way, the best way, it tends to be at least 6-to-1, at least 6 police officers surrounding one person being arrested. It is never 1-to-1. So just to show you the mathematical impossibility of deporting 11 million people, we're not going to have 11 million deportation officers to do that. Consider that there are currently a grand total in all 50 states of 800,000 law enforcement officers in the United States. That's everyone from local police officers to FBI agents, state police, everyone with a gun and a badge. Everyone, 800,000. If every single law enforcement official in the United States of America stopped everything they were doing and none of them slept, and everything they were doing stopped, all of the protecting of you stopped, and they devoted themselves to doing nothing but deporting 11 million people, they couldn't do it. There aren't enough of them, because each one of them would need to personally round up by himself or herself 13 people at a time. And I say all of this not to suggest that Donald Trump won't cruelly ruin lives and rip apart families through deportation. He will. But he absolutely will not ever be able to create a mass deportation operation in the United States that deports 11 million people. That's impossible, and he knows it. He will definitely deport thousands of people. He may deport 100,000 people over the 4 years. But he knows today that he can't possibly deliver on the mass deportation promised to his voters of 11 million people or more, which is why when Kristen Welker asked him about his deportation plan, he did not say even the single word deportation. Didn't say a word about it. After Donald Trump finished his rambling non-answer to Kristen Welker's first question, she followed that up with, do you know what that price tag looks like, your deportation plan? Do you have a price tag? And Donald Trump said, it's not a question of a price tag. It's not. Really, we have no choice. When people have been killed and murdered, and when drug lords have destroyed countries, and now they're going back to those countries because they're not staying here, it's not quite, there is no price tag. That's correct. There is no price tag because there is no plan. None. And there are no law enforcement officers in the United States today with nothing to do who are available to take on the task of mass deportation of 11 million people. There will definitely be Trump deportations. But how many? And who will decide that? Which brings us back to President who? Who is really going to be the president deciding just how many resources can be redirected to deportation? Donald Trump has said, if you take him at his word, which of course no one ever should, that he's going to leave deportation and everything else up to Robert Kennedy Jr. Donald Trump has actually said he's going to leave everything in the government up to Robert Kennedy Jr. except oil and gas. That means the Defense Department. That means everything. Donald Trump wants to keep all the oil and gas decisions to himself, which will give him a lot of free time because the government is not in the oil and gas business. And Donald Trump will tell his White House chief of staff to make sure every oil drilling permit gets approved in this country, and that's it. And that will take less than 1 minute of presidential time. Donald Trump has actually said this about Robert Kennedy Jr. I've been friends of his for a long time, and I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicine. The only thing I don't think I'm going to let him even get near is the liquid gold under our feet. He wants to do some things, and we're going to let him go to it. I just said, but Bobby, leave the oil to me. We have more liquid gold than any country in the world, more than Saudi Arabia. We have more than Russia. Bobby, stay away from the liquid gold. Other than that, go have a good time, Bobby. So that's it. According to Donald Trump, President Bobby Kennedy is in charge of tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. President Bobby Kennedy is in charge of mass deportations. President Bobby Kennedy is in charge of all health care issues. President Bobby Kennedy is in charge of the entire presidency. Everything, except anything involving oil and gas. So, what's President Kennedy going to do? Are we going to have a President Kennedy? Or are we going to have a President Elon Musk? Donald Trump said, at the suggestion of Elon Musk, who has given me his complete and total endorsement, I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms. Okay. So if Elon Musk is going to do an evaluation of the entire federal government and the entire federal budget and decide which parts of the federal government should have funding cuts or funding increases, that's called being president of the United States. So, will we have a President Musk? A new and perhaps even more likely president emerged today. But according to Donald Trump's hiring and firing record, this would be a temporary president, maybe 6 months. Donald Trump announced in a written statement today that he has chosen Susan Wiles, his campaign manager, as his first White House chief of staff. In his previous 4 years in the White House, Donald Trump went through 4 White House chiefs of staff. The first White House chief of staff was fired after about 6 months on the job, 192 days to be specific. Susie Wiles has a traditional Republican establishment background, starting in 1979 as a low-level assistant in the office of Buffalo Republican Congressman Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp was an NFL quarterback who finished his career with the Buffalo Bills and became a Republican member of the House of Representatives. Jack Kemp was one of the big star Republicans in Congress in those days. He ran for president in the 1988 primaries and then was chosen in 1996 as Bob Dole's running mate for vice president against Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Susie Wiles went from Jack Kemp's team to Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign as a scheduler. In 2008, she was a Florida county co-chair for John McCain's presidential campaign. In 2011, she worked on the Republican presidential campaign of Utah's John Huntsman, who was a moderate Republican who had served as President Obama's ambassador to China. Susie Wiles had no history in extremist Republican politics until she joined the Trump campaign in 2016. In a profile of Wiles in Politico in April, Fernanda Mondi, a Florida-based Democratic pollster and MSNBC analyst, called her smart and sophisticated. The article says, many who know Wiles and who were not at all glad Trump was ever the president and even less glad he might be president again are quite glad that she at least is still at his side. If Donald Trump is going to be president, I want Susie Wiles involved, said Carlos Corbello, the former Republican Congress member, who's an opponent of Donald Trump's. If this guy wins, and I certainly hope he doesn't, but if he were to win, I would hope to hell that she will play a major role, said her friend Paul McCormick. So, will we have a President Wiles? Susie Wiles knows more about how to be president than Robert Kennedy Jr. does or Elon Musk does. And she knows more about how to be president than Donald Trump does, much more. And she's going to have the biggest office in the West Wing of the White House that is not occupied by Donald Trump. And she's going to be in that office an awful lot more than Donald Trump is going to be in his office. When someone needs an answer to a presidential question, will they go to an empty Oval Office where the guy who's supposed to be there is out golfing somewhere? Or will they take that short walk down to the end of the hall to the corner office of the White House Chief of Staff? It's a rectangular office, not an Oval Office. But that's where the real president might be sitting, in the Trump White House. In Donald Trump's speech on election night, the only policy he mentioned were the 2 words, cutting taxes. He never said the word tariff. He never said the word deportation, nothing else, cutting taxes. He will sign a tax cut written by Republicans in Congress. And that could be the only campaign promise he actually keeps. On election night, when in the middle of his speech, Donald Trump invited assorted cast of characters to say something into the microphone, watch what happened when he invited Susie Wiles to the microphone. Because in that moment, she alone, among the people on that stage, proved that she knows exactly how to handle Donald Trump. She knows exactly what he really wants, which is all the attention.
Susie, come here. Come here, Susie. Chris, come here, Chris. Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden. Come here, Chris. Come here, Chris. Susie likes to stay in the background. She's not in the background. Come here, say something.
Yeah, so she let the guy who worked for her in the campaign do the talking. She wouldn't say a word into that microphone. Not one word. If the real president is going to be Susie Wiles, she knows the one thing that she has to do publicly is never get caught being president, which is exactly why she turned away from that microphone on election night.